The call arrived during a late Tuesday afternoon, right as I pulled into the gravel driveway of the custom home we had purchased only a month prior. The voice on the receiver sounded weathered, hesitant, and entirely unfamiliar as it asked for validation of my identity. I confirmed who I was, expecting a sales pitch, but the stranger explained he was the previous homeowner and had left something behind in the living room ceiling. He revealed that a hidden camera was still active, broadcasting a live cloud feed he had accidentally opened earlier that day. A cold knot formed in my stomach as the man insisted I come to his property alone to see the footage myself, warning me not to utter a single word to my wife. I sat behind the steering wheel for several minutes, staring at the warm glow radiating from the front windows where my wife had just hung decorative lights. Inside the house, the faint sound of laughter echoed as her family helped organize the remaining moving boxes. When I stepped inside, my wife offered a bright smile from the kitchen counter and asked if everything was all right. I managed a strained nod, muttered a quick lie about running to the local hardware store for supplies, and pressed a brief kiss against her cheek while my pulse raced. Leaving the neighborhood felt surreal, as if a sudden fracture had split the foundation of the quiet life I believed we were building together. The former owner resided in a weather-worn house tucked behind a commercial strip on the edge of town, his hands visibly shaking as he opened the front door. He ushered me into a dimly lit home office, explaining that he felt a moral obligation to intervene after witnessing the footage on his screen. He pointed toward a laptop display where a recorded clip from earlier that week was queued up, showing my own living room while I had been away at the office. On the screen, my wife, her mother, and her sister were pouring glasses of wine and celebrating on the sofa. My wife laughed out loud, boasting about how easily I had bought into the idea of a fresh start, while her mother noted that the hardest part of the plan was already finished. As the playback continued, my wife produced a manila folder from her bag, proudly displaying what she identified as power of attorney documents. She openly bragged to her family that I would never examine the fine print, explaining that they just needed to keep me distracted with work until the asset transfer was legally finalized. The older man quietly muted the audio, offering a look of genuine sympathy as I sat frozen in the chair, absorbing the reality of the betrayal. They were not just whispering behind my back, they were systematically dismantling my financial future while playing the roles of loving family members. I requested a full digital copy of the files, thanked the man for his honesty, and left the house with a cold, calculated plan beginning to form in my mind. When I returned home later that evening, the entire household was acting out a flawless performance of domestic bliss. My sister-in-law was swept up in organizing the garage, my mother-in-law was preparing a dessert, and my wife welcomed me back with an affectionate hug. Every smile and sweet remark now felt entirely synthetic, forcing me to play along with their game while keeping the existence of the video completely hidden. Over the following days, I adopted a quiet, exhausted persona to make them believe I was entirely consumed by my career responsibilities. I secretly installed audio recorders beneath the furniture and routing equipment, ensuring that every hidden conversation they held would be captured in high definition. The true depth of their malice became undeniable later that week, when the microphones captured the three women discussing the final stages of their timeline. The sister questioned whether I would raise a legal fight, but my wife confidently dismissed the concern, stating they only needed to wait 2 more weeks for the funds to clear. Her mother added that once the money was successfully moved, they would simply demand separation, force me out, and liquidate the property for themselves. Hearing them casually schedule the destruction of my life, while I provided for them broke whatever remaining affection I had left. I opened a private document on my computer that night, detailing a 3-step counter-strategy to protect my assets and reclaim control. The following morning, I scheduled an urgent meeting with a veteran asset protection lawyer named Arthur Vance, who operated out of a modest brick building downtown. I presented just enough information to initiate the paperwork, explaining that I needed to immediately revoke a power of attorney agreement I had executed months prior. The attorney cautioned that an unannounced revocation might alert them, which was precisely what I wanted, provided my financial defense was already locked down. We legally altered the registrations on my primary bank accounts, investment portfolios, and the deed to the home by Friday afternoon. They remained completely oblivious, assuming they were circling a defenseless target while I left behind nothing but empty accounts for them to inherit. To ensure they stayed compliant with my timeline, I walked into the house over the weekend pretending to have received a massive corporate promotion. The announcement brought immediate cheers from the family, prompting me to double down on the deception by treating them to expensive dinners and gifts. They fully believed fortune was smiling on them, and that their window of opportunity had expanded, entirely unaware that they were merely actors following a script I controlled. 2 days before their intended transfer date, I spotted my wife pacing the backyard while whispering into her phone. She told the person on the line that the forged signatures were ready and my name would be removed from the property deed by the week. That very evening, I compiled the comprehensive digital file containing every audio recording, cloud video, and proof of signature forgery, forwarding it directly to my legal counsel. I instructed Arthur to finalize the emergency restraining orders and fraud motions, so we could execute them simultaneously on Tuesday morning. He replied with a single confirmation, promising that the legal trap was perfectly set for the upcoming confrontation. The next night, I hosted a lavish celebration dinner at the house, grilling steaks and raising toasts to the future while they openly mocked my ignorance. My sister-in-law raised her glass to toast my wife as the future owner of the estate, and I smiled right back, promising them an unforgettable surprise on Tuesday. When the designated morning arrived, the atmosphere inside the house was filled with unearned triumph as the women drank champagne and made calls to boast about their impending victory. At exactly 9 o'clock, the front doorbell rang, prompting me to open it for Arthur and a uniformed county court officer. I requested that the 3 women take a seat in the living room before the officer stepped forward to hand my wife the official legal documents. The paperwork detailed a formal cease and desist order for attempted grand fraud, along with an immediate freeze on all joint financial accounts. The room erupted into chaos as her mother began screaming, but I calmly explained that while they were busy plotting, I had quietly reclaimed everything. I pointed out that the house, the savings, and even the jewelry they wore had been stripped from their reach, leaving them with absolutely nothing. I slid a duplicate flash drive across the table, informing them that every recorded conversation was already secured in a legal cloud backup beyond their control. My wife glared at me with pure hatred, attempting to call me erratic, but I simply countered that I had finally opened my eyes to their true nature. I gave them a strict deadline to remove their personal belongings from the premises before sunset, ignoring their desperate arguments about the home belonging to them. I reminded them that their names were absent from every single piece of documentation, proving they had risked everything on a crime and lost. My sister-in-law attempted to defend their actions by claiming they were only protecting my wife's future interest, but I cut her off by highlighting their total lack of respect and partnership. My wife eventually tried to dismiss her family from the room to beg for a private compromise, but I laughed, reminding her that she had chosen to include them in the conspiracy. I instructed the court officer to forcefully remove them if they remained past the deadline before walking upstairs to let the silence settle over the house. Below me, the sounds of slammed cabinets and packing tape replaced the arrogant tones they had used for weeks, signaling the total collapse of their plan. By the time the sun began to set over the horizon, their luggage was piled neatly on the sidewalk, and my wife was weeping as she realized the full extent of her defeat. I was not watching from the window, however, as I had already driven downtown to deliver the evidence package to a senior partner at the prominent law firm where my wife had recently applied. The partner reviewed the documentation of forgery and attempted extortion, shaking his head before concluding that her professional aspirations in the legal field were effectively finished. By midnight, her credentials had been flagged, her professional network was filled with inquiries, and I sent one final message from an anonymous account telling her to rebuild her life from scratch. Sitting on my porch later that night with a quiet drink, I felt completely free, knowing they never saw the retaliation coming.